I've been doing this for so long that you probably don't remember that I did not set out in life to become a yogi. I did not wake up one morning in Connersville, Indiana, and go, wouldn't it be nice to walk around the world in an orange skirt? I could go on with that line, but I'm going to leave it and say that in my fraternity house in college, I started to wonder if I was really on the right track. And, you know, in an era when the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War was slowly convincing me that the Christianity that I was raised in and the America that I thought I lived in were not actually what they said they were. You guys live in a much more peaceful era, so you probably can hardly relate. Exactly. But when I was in college and realizing that everything I had been taught as a child and a young person was totally full of shit, I mean, really, I had no idea what to do in Bloomington, Indiana. Somehow, I mean, and this happens a lot of times in everybody's life. Somehow, even in a state of complete confusion and despair, somehow what we need turns up in front of us. And the amazing thing was, this, I just needed the simplest thing, which was to be exposed to yoga. And I started doing yoga, and I really discovered two things doing yoga. I discovered that I was energy. I discovered that. I did yoga and I literally felt the energy in my body wake up. I could feel the energy moving in my arms and my fingers and my legs and my toes and in my torso. And that led me to the most important discovery that I experienced in yoga. I discovered my heart. I discovered my heart, and that changed everything for me. It completely changed it. I hadn't discovered yet a pathway to a life I could live in. I still only knew that the life the university was preparing me for was a life I absolutely could not live in. But I hadn't discovered yet what my life would be, but I did have my heart. And you know, that was everything. And continuing to practice and continuing to deepen my experience of my heart, my connection to my heart, you know, I became increasingly settled in the awareness of myself as flow. And cultivating that flow not stressing about the complete hypocrisy of the place I live in, or stressing about, I was involved in a campus action that was one of the coordinators of a campus action that closed Indiana University, the largest university that was closed by a student strike for 6 weeks, the longest period of time that a university was closed. And at the end of it, the chancellor of the university stood in front of me, in front of a group of us, and said, everything that you've been protesting for, we're going to give you. I didn't get any popularity points by calling him a liar at that meeting. But all my friends said, look, settle down. We won, it's fine. And we left and went away from the university, and 2 weeks later, they did everything they say they were going to do that we were protesting anyway. And there's never been a campus protest since then. I wasn't stressed that I was living with a bunch of liars, for leaders, because I had what was really, really, really important to me. And in those days, I was the only yoga teacher probably between Philadelphia and at least Denver, maybe Santa Cruz. Oh, there wasn't like this movement swelling around me. There was nobody. And there were no books. One of the most important, though, books that I bumped into, a book that I think, one of the few Indian books is translated, and I'm going to back up for a second and say, studying Indian spirituality is, pardon my language, really fucking difficult. It's difficult. And it's difficult because you have thousands of years of tradition, written down only 1,800 years ago. And even though the Indians claim it is eternal and unchanging, we have a literary trail that demonstrates that that's pure baloney. And the next thing is that over the period of time, just like in the period of our individual lives today, our language has changed completely since we were in high school. Well, the language of Indian religion has changed completely about 20 times in the last 2,000 years. And it has bifurcated. It's gone in lots of different directions. Sometimes taking the language from one tradition into a place that the people who were using it before never even imagined it. It's difficult. The next problem with studying Indian religion is translators don't practice. And so, really and truly, they don't really know what they're talking about. And, most of them aren't really even so interested in capturing the spirit of the literature. They're just trying to change one set of words into another set of words because in publishing that, they get a salary bump and their tenure can happen. It's difficult. But I think I wanted to say to you that one of the most meaningful books I've read, and a book that has been translated many, many times, you know, a lot of it badly, is the Bhagavad Gita. You know, when I first started studying, that was one of about 3 books that was translated. And the message of the Bhagavad Gita is a message that, you know, I remember most mornings these days when I look at my news feed and I see what's going on, not just in America, but all over the world. And that message is very simple. The Bhagavad Gita historically comes at a period in which a debate has been happening for a while in India. The debate is between the ritualists who say that ritual action is the most important element of a person's spiritual development. The end point of which, the ultimate of which, is called liberation. And that's a whole interesting discussion. That's a whole different talk. What is liberation? But ritual action or meditation is the debate. Which is more important? The Bhagavad Gita comes down on the side of meditation. It says meditation is more important. But the context is really interesting because in the Bhagavad Gita you have this guy, Arjuna. You know, he's in a complex family system. I don't know if you guys probably all have perfect families, get along, everybody gets along, they love each other, you get together at Thanksgiving and Christmas, exchange presents, tell each other how wonderful you are. In India, especially in wealthy families, that just wasn't the style. You know, typically, probably everywhere in the world though, the biggest problem for the king, and remember, the king is just the biggest thug in the place. That's all. He's the guy who can beat the crap out of everybody else. And in India, you know, your ability to prove that is really important. So in order to avoid a big family fight, Arjuna and his brothers leave the palace and let their cousins run the show. And they're away from the scene for a number of years until their cousins have just screwed it up terribly and are having to get, you know, rougher and rougher and rougher with the populace in order to keep them from tearing the place apart, because they're stealing everything, because Arjuna's cousin brothers are stealing everything that isn't nailed down, and people are pissed. So they come to this place where they're going to duke it out. And Arjuna's teacher and chariot driver is called Krishna. He's his guru. And Arjuna has been training his whole life for this. I mean, he is a guy who's capable of very gracefully cutting your guts out. So he's standing there at the beginning of this dust up, and he gets weak in the knees and says, you know, I mean, we didn't want to do this in the first place. That's why we came here. We don't want to do it now. I don't want to kill my family. And Krishna brings him to an interesting place. Krishna comes there and says, look, if you don't do this, you'll be disgraced. You know, you'll be disgraced. If you do this, maybe you'll die, but at least you'll die with honor, and and most likely you'll win. I think he said definitely you'll win. And they go through this conversation. And the paradox here is that the first thing, the real message of the Bhagavad Gita is a message that the Shaiva scriptures also want to convey to us very strongly when they describe the fundamental quality of Shiva as Svatantriya, or as completely autonomous, is what Svatantriya means. And basically what they're saying is, Shiva to Arjuna, Krishna to Arjuna and the tantrics to their disciples, life has a will of its own. 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 And the paradoxical pathway is we have to work hard and train a lot. Train ourselves, train our bodies, train our minds, train our awareness, train our hearts, train our energy. We have to train ourselves, through significant effort to come to a place where we appreciate that we have no control at all. We have no control at all. And all the shit you're trying to control, you're kidding yourself. It's delusional. We have no control. We should work hard. And Arjuna is telling Krishna, work hard, do good, and understand that the fruits of your effort are in the hands of life itself, which has completely and totally a will of its own. Sometimes we use the term surrender. I know that term is used a lot in the Bhagavad Gita. Surrender to the will of the divine. In Islam also, inshallah, if God wills. There is, for us, in America, it's a really difficult thing. We are told we can make a difference, we are the change, we can do this, we can do that. I believed it when I was at the Justice Department in 1969 and at the Pentagon. I believed it. There's a number of times I believed it, and I got beat up by police and gassed and sprayed and every kind of thing you can imagine. Well, maybe not every kind of thing, but looking back on it now, I have to say, nothing at all changed, not even a little bit. In fact, they learned from what we did and got 50 times smarter than we did, than we were. The proof is it hasn't happened again, and things have only gotten worse. So, and I'm not trying to depress you. There's a couple of things here that I want to say. We have no control. And that's something we have to come to grips with and come to peace with. We have no control. And the amazing thing is we don't even need control. Because when we let go, we allow our energy to expand. The tensions, the gripping, that we're engaged in, consciously sometimes and mostly constantly, unconsciously, releases and allows our energy to expand. And this remarkable thing is that there is inside us the biggest part of what we are, that is this extraordinary, abundance and this extraordinary power, which somehow gets activated as we practice. And I can tell you exactly how it gets activated. It gets activated because it resides in the chakras, and as we take our attention into ourselves and find those energy centers and concentrate on them and begin to unlock them, their extraordinary power becomes released into our energy field and begins to work its magic in the world, attracting to us, drawing us to those circumstances which are appropriate to the full awakening and unfolding of our heart. And unfolding our hearts, we discover that we are not this body. We're not these hands of water that, we're dumping back into the river. We're not this body. We are a flow of divine energy moving in space, time, but never entangled in it completely. We are this huge, vast abundance that only our tensions and mostly derived from the disappointments of our ancestors. We are these tensions that are self-limiting, that released from, reveal in us, dimensions of love. A whole nother lecture, that word. Dimensions of love which touch and begin to untangle our life and all the lives that our life is connected in. Begins to reach into space-time and call to us all the love that we have ever participated in all the iterations of this energy flow manifest. Until we come to a place where that love has awakened itself so completely that we realize, there are not many loves and not even many souls. There is only one soul, the soul of the divine, and that one soul is filled with devotion. Which brings us back to making some conscious efforts to come to a place where we can deeply understand that we have no control and we are only an expression of infinite and unconditional love. I think it's important for us, especially as we move forward over the next years, because they will be tumultuous, to realize that we have no control. And then the next thing we need to realize is that we don't need it. We have everything inside us already that we really need, and what we need to do is shed the tension and the fear, shed all of our judgments. We need to change dimensions so that rather than becoming entangled in some action to counter an action that's going to counter an action that's going to counter an action. We are taking all the energy of all the action into ourself and expressing it on an individual level as self-cultivation. And on the highest level of devotion, we are allowing that magic which is embedded in us to begin to do its work and transform the world, releasing tensions and allowing creative energy to flow. It is in flow that there is healing. Flow is where healing comes from. Flow is where abundance comes from. Flow. I had this really weird experience when I was a kid. And that was when I first started the ashram. Strats and I hitchhiked from Bloomington to Dallas. And it was in November. It was the end of November. It was Thanksgiving. But Rudy was going to be in Dallas for Thanksgiving, and I wanted to be with Rudy, so we hitchhiked. The weather was really shitty. But Strats and I had this thing. Every time we got out on the highway, we'd say, okay, now we're going to get a flow going. And we'd start to feel the energy moving just between he and I. We just moved the energy just between he and I. We never stood outside longer than 5 minutes. And the first night, we made it to Springfield, Missouri, where, strangely, these evangelical Christian girls picked us up at a restaurant that we had pulled off for at the end. It was dark out and raining like hell, and took us home with them. Turns out evangelical Christian girls are a lot like Catholic girls. At least in those days. That was the old days. The new days are here. But flow, contact, alignment, and flow lift us beyond the need for control into an experience of joyous abundance that is unimaginable possibility. Working hard to dissolve our tensions, we discover this ocean of creative energy inside us. An ocean, a universe. And awakening and releasing it, we are liberated to be our very, very, very finest and highest self. And I sit here week after week for the last 47 years, specifically to support anyone who, for whatever reason, has understood that in order to have a life worth living, they really need to grow. So I'm happy to be with you. Thank you for being here. Namaste.